very good morning to you as we continue to follow the developments at the UN General Assembly in New York. And this is what we call Day 4 for the Caribbean. The states are making their presentations and done so over a number of days now. What's interesting is that, well, today we expected that the two states would be up first and that we would hear from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and also from the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis territory. The schedule has been shifting, as you know, over the last days. At this point, we've got the Israeli Prime Minister who is on this at the podium, and since we have a great interest in what is happening in the Middle East, I think we should go to that main stage now and pick up his presentation, sorry, we should go to that stage, but let me just make the adjustment here to take in his live, because I'd set up really ensure that we picked up the speech overnight. In fact, what I'll do right now, actually, let me do what I intended to do in the first place. Last evening, the Foreign Minister of the Bahamas, Fred Mitchell, delivered his 10th address to the UN. That is what I wanted to share with you before we went to St. Kitts and Nevis or to St. Vincent and Grenadines. So we've got a little time on our hands here. Let's go then join that particular presentation by the Foreign Minister of Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Frederick Audley Mitchell, Minister for Foreign Affairs and the Public Service of the Bahamas.
So, Mr. President, it is an honor and privilege to return to this podium this year. This is my 10th appearance here, and I'm proud to be back to this most important forum, but doubly so because a son of the Caricom and wider Caribbean region sits as its president. So, Ambassador Dennis Francis, I wish you well, and suffice it to say, the Bahamas stands ready to assist and support. So, the Bahamas National Statistics Institute reported this year in the national census that there are now 399,314 people living in the Bahamas. So let's call that 400,000. We're small, that's clear. We're 700 islands, keys, and reefs, that's clear. We have 4,000 square miles of land and 100,000 square miles of ocean, that's clear. We're therefore a small island developing state, that's very clear. The Prime Minister, Philip Edward Brave Davis, says that the #1 foreign policy issue for the Bahamas is climate change. He has expressed the existential fear we face along with other island peoples, whether in the Atlantic or the Pacific. Will we be climate refugees or will we face a watery grave? And tonight, I'm wearing a gift from the people of the Marshall Islands to share our solidarity with those in the Pacific. Having expressed that sentiment in many fora throughout the world, though, over the years, that the Prime Minister's been in office, it was actually shocking to us to hear one of our developed nation partners and their position on climate reparations for loss and damage on the part of his country. Their response was that under no circumstances would there be reparations for loss and damage from climate change. Mr. President, small island developing states like the Bahamas have been negotiating for loss and damage for over 30 years. So it begs the question, how much are 399,314 lives worth? The word reparations means so much in another context as well. Millions of African peoples were ripped from the continent of Africa, brought to the West, and worked for free for 200 years. In the British Empire, they were so-called freed in 1834, worked for another 4 years in an apprenticeship scheme for free. The British government paid £20 million to the slavers for the loss of their property. That was then 40% of their national budget. This is, in today's money, 17 billion pounds. And we're advised that the bonds were just paid off in 2015. Yet, not one penny was paid to the slaves or their descendants, and not even an apology is being offered for the moral tragedy which slavery represents. So, no to reparations on climate change, and no to reparations on slavery. No, over and over again. The generation of our leaders that came before us, though, did not accept no for an answer. And that is why we are freer today than we were a generation ago. And they were freer than the generation before them. When Michael Manley, the Jamaican Prime Minister, stood at this very podium after his historic victory at the polls in 1972 and demanded a new world international economic order, his call for economic and social justice did not at first succeed, but it has been taken up by his successors who continue this call throughout the Caribbean. Mr. Manley was taking up the call by Marcus Garvey of Jamaica before him and Robert Love of the Bahamas, the generation before Mr. Manley. And Marcus Garvey was taking up the calls of W.E.B. Du Bois and James Weldon Johnson of Bahamian roots before him. Lyndon Pindling, our founding Prime Minister, did not accept no when the Nassau Accords were forged to say, let Nelson Mandela go. Clearly then, no is not an acceptable answer to an unfree people. We in this generation take up the call for this generation's call, and Brave Davis and the Bahamas says no is not an acceptable answer. So the Bahamas wants the world to know that whether on reparations for slavery or on climate change, no is not the correct answer. We must use our collective voices to reject the gospel according to no. So long as we have our voices, we will pass our message to the next generation and so on until we succeed and justice is served. We do not accept the gospel according to no when it comes to Haiti. As the first Black republic and the first independent Caribbean state, Haiti has paid dearly for daring to declare and assert their independence from colonial rule back in 1804. First, they were forced to pay some $20 billion in today's money to be let alone by their former colonial masters. Then they were, in the 20th century, ruled by an invading military for 2 decades that took all the wealth from their treasury and forced the payments back to Washington, D.C. And today, we wonder why the situation is as dire as it is. So the Western world owes Haiti and the Haitian people, and we must fight to help them resolve their issues. The security situation in Haiti today is untenable, and I thank all the governments in both the developed world, the United States and Canada, and in Caricom for their work in trying to resolve the political and security issues there. I urge the people of Haiti, especially the leaders of Haiti today, to do all that they can to continue to work toward a Haitian-led political settlement, and it will take compromise to do so. Mr. President, this is a humanitarian crisis in our region, which the UN has received many, many humanitarian pledges that can barely meet the on-the-ground humanitarian needs of the Haitian people. We must approve with haste a UN Security Council-backed resolution on a multinational force for Haiti. So first, I'd like to thank the government of Kenya for pledging to lead a multinational force to improve the security issues in Haiti. We in the Bahamas plan to join them, as does Jamaica, and other Caribbean countries have pledged humanitarian support. They, along with all other states, have pledged support to require, but it does require this UNSC resolution to take action. As I said, both Bahamas and Jamaica have pledged troops, other Caricom states humanitarian support. A geopolitical settlement must also be possible in Cuba. What a magnificent country, with a rich heritage and a smart people who've suffered from economic measures which seem imposed upon them externally grounded in ideology. But if you can do business with Vietnam, there's nothing in logic which prevents doing business with Cuba. The irony of the situation is that money in US dollars is difficult to process across Cuban borders. Yet, 9 or more flights per day leave Miami for Havana and fly back again. And the largest embassy in Havana is that of the United States. We appreciate all the steps that have been taken by the present US administration to revert to the status quo ante to 2016 as a starting point. But the most sensible thing to do is to drop all the restrictions and normalize relations with Cuba post-haste. The continuation of the status quo represents a security problem for the Bahamas. Finally, I wish to repeat a favorite theme of our Prime Minister, and it is this: the pathologies resulting from the asymmetrical relationship between our trading partners in the EU and the Americas on the question of financial services. The OECD and the EU have arrogated unto themselves to be the moral police of the world on issues of taxation. The result is that free trade no longer exists, but a tax process is being imposed by our former colonial masters, so that it makes banking so difficult within our domestic spheres, and international trade is made even more difficult. And they've gone one step farther by imposing the requirement now for what they call an electronic travel authority for you to enter their countries, even when they say there's no visa required to enter. The Prime Minister therefore joins other developing states in supporting a UN Convention on Tax which will govern standards on taxation frameworks, including financial services. The OECD cannot declare legitimacy for developing universal outputs while decision-making and membership remain exclusive. So in our view, the UN is the appropriate and universal body to design and build an equitable and inclusive international tax administration architecture with equal-footed representation. So 1973, the Bahamas is 50 years old this year. It's the 10th July 1973, we became independent. And this year, 50 years later, it was a very proud moment for our citizens. So if you go to the Sandlands Primary School in my constituency in Nassau, and you say the words of a popular song, even the little children know the song, and the members of the delegation who are here today, I'll bet they know it as well. It's a man named Elkin Outen who sang this song. And he says, Nassau is the capital, and the children say Bahamas. Bimini is the gateway, and the children say Bahamas. 1492, Columbus landed, and the children will say back Bahamas. 1973, we were free, Bahamas. And so, happy anniversary, Bahamas, golden jubilee, Bahamas. We're proud of our country. I leave the song with you and invite you to come visit us. 8 million people will join us as tourists this year. We are 400,000 strong. Stay and enjoy our beauty. Understand our climate vulnerability. In our work, we ask you to join us to help reverse the tidal rising. God bless you. Thanks for listening, because now, more than ever, we need the United Nations. Thank you. Good night.
So there we are then, with the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, Fred Mitchell, delivering quite a speech. It turns out the shifting of the schedule, we're now catching the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Let's go there now.
Or an emergent hegemony are dressed up as self-serving calls for a new world order. All sauce and gall, but of little or no substance, difficult to swallow. From the rough trenches of the periphery, St. Vincent and Grenadines poses yet again, in response, three haunting questions. What's new? Which world? And who gives the orders? In this context, the urgency of genuine reform of the United Nations Security Council is to be embraced after decades of futile bickering and foot-dragging. Surely it is long overdue for sensible compromises on this matter, reflective of the contemporary condition of our world. In these troubled and uncertain times, enveloped in limitations and weaknesses, there are nevertheless possibilities and strengths. The wise and mature leadership of this collective, the United Nations, is immediately required in this great endeavor to put things right for humanity. We gathered here as representatives of national or regional interests are not and cannot reasonably be agents of purely impersonal forces driving humanity inexorably to further peril and even damnation. Notwithstanding the imperfections of a multilateral system grounded in international law and civilized norms, we at this assembly, in concert with each other and our peoples, can be the fresh hope, the beacon, the light, not merely to inspire, but to draw out of each other and our respective peoples a goodness, a high quality and a nobility, which oftentimes we may not even know as yet that we possess. In the process, let us clear certain ideational cobwebs from our brains. It is, for example, wholly unhelpful to frame the central contradictions of our troubled times as revolving around a struggle between autocracies and democracies. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a strong liberal democracy, rejects this wrong-headed thesis. It is evident to all right-thinking persons, devoid of self-serving hypocrisy, that the struggle today between the dominant powers is centered upon the control, ownership, and distribution of the world's resources. The struggle has been and is about who gets what, when, where, and how. Civilized life and living now demands fairness, justice, peace, security, and prosperity for all. This civilized goal is unlikely ever to be satisfactorily attained if the strong and powerful continue with impunity to do what they can, and the weak and fragile suffer what they must, despite their oftentimes enfeebled resistance. Throughout history, powerful countries exhibit a certain schizophrenia. They possess and deploy all their instruments of domination, yet they are racked by bewildering insecurities, which frequently turn them into beasts of unreason to their own detriment. In this way, they overreach and sow seeds of their own downfall. In the process, sadly, they hobble humanity needlessly. Excellencies, let us accord mature consideration to a matter of immediacy in our America, to use Jose Marti's telling formulation. We urge the United States of America, our friend, the most powerful and economically dominant country since the dawn of human civilization, a nation which espouses humane values, to end its unilateral and oppressive sanctions and impositions that are contrary to international law, which have been rolled out against Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. It is also plain silly and factually incorrect to label Cuba a sponsor of state terrorism, a label prompted by partisan domestic politics in South Florida. But it hurts the Cuban people massively and unnecessarily. The sanctions and coercive measures against Venezuela, including the weaponizing of the US dollar, have caused the collapse of the Petro-Carib Agreement, which delivered substantial benefits to over a dozen Caribbean countries, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We in the Caribbean have thus become collateral damage. At the same time, Your Excellencies, it is long overdue for the Republic of China, Taiwan to be brought in from the diplomatic cold. The magnificent Chinese civilization, through the fever of history, has delivered to the contemporary world in practical terms more than one recognizable national political expression institutionally. Surely, Taiwan's quest for participation in relevant specialized agencies of the United Nations is reasonable and ought to be accommodated. Repeatedly, Taiwan has shown itself to be a responsible member of the international community. Peace across the Taiwan Straits is an imperative for the prosperity and security of the world. Excellencies, on the bundle of issues touching on concerning climate change, global warming, biodiversity challenges, land degradation and desertification, there is a veritable Babel, a tower of Babel. There is an overabundance of sweet-sounding lyrics by the major emitters, but they turn out to be bitterly deceptive. A lack or insufficiency of meaningful corrective action by the irresponsible climate polluters, countries and companies, constitute unpardonable, egregious wrongs. Indeed, it is a species of barbarism. The upcoming Conference of Parties under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in the United Arab Emirates is a critical test of humanity's commitment to save our planet from the ravages of man-made climate change. We know the oft-repeated benchmarks and the corrective agenda. I don't have to repeat them here. In this composite package of policies and measures, a special consideration has to be accorded the most vulnerable countries, such as small island developing states in the Caribbean and the Pacific, and the poorer communities in climate-distressed areas of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Excellencies, crisscrossing the issue of financing for development in the era of climate change and the downside ramifications of structural distortions in the global economy for poor and vulnerable middle-income countries is the Bridgestone Initiative 2.2. And this has already been endorsed by the Caribbean community, the Community of States of Latin America and the Caribbean, the Association of Small Island States, and dozens of countries in the African Union and elsewhere. This progressive initiative contains creative financing proposals that would result in more resources on highly concessionary terms for the poor and vulnerable regions. The multi-dimensional vulnerability index championed by vulnerable middle-income countries include those in the Caribbean. This finds a place in the reform mix of financing for development. St. Vincent and the Grenadines urges a strong support of the Bridgestone Initiative 2.0 and the MVI by this United Nations General Assembly. St. Vincent and the Grenadines also endorses the initiative of the Bahamas to remove from the OECD, the Rich Club, any global authority it assumes for suzerainty on international taxation and related matters. Properly, they ought to be resident in the United Nations. Excellencies, developing countries must refrain from being mere prideful villagers, obsessed with immediate trifles and blind ourselves to the far more compelling issues beyond our individual control and which demand a unifying solidarity with others to confront successfully our travails. Poor, vulnerable, climate-distressed, and resource-challenged developing countries are absolutely fed up and insulted by the unfulfilled perennial promises of the developed world on climate financing. Excellencies, in September 2015, at our United Nations, all nations signed on to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals targeted for achievement by 2030. Earlier this week, the bundle of issues centered on the SDGs were accorded a special consideration, and admirably, a refreshing of them has been canvassed. But the critical issue of a sufficiency of financing for development, including climate financing and reparations, remains the proverbial elephant in the room to be effectively harnessed to serve the deserving. Here again, agreed commitments entered into must be translated into real actions. St. Vincent and Grenadines has been insisting as part of the conversation on the SDGs that there must be a special carve-out for reparations from European countries for the legacies of underdevelopment engendered by native genocide and the enslavement of African bodies, horrendous crimes against humanity. In this matrix, a special focus is required for Haiti. The case for reparatory justice within the framework of the SDGs is compelling and unanswerably strong. The time for reparations has come. This demand will not go away. Africa, the Caribbean, and our diaspora, and others who hanker for a just world insist on it. Excellencies, in our Caribbean community, one of our member states, Haiti, continues to be confronted by multiple existential challenges of immediacy, lodged in the political, security, social, humanitarian, and environmental domains. Caricom is seeking to facilitate a political solution by engaging the widest cross-sections of stakeholders to fashion a government of national unity to replace that which is bedeviled by a lack of legitimacy and effectiveness, and to prepare the way for democratic elections in a suitable time frame. The United Nations Security Council cannot reasonably stand askance from this process in circumstances in which the criminal gangs, inclusive of those with links to the government and the national police, are essentially in control of the capital city. Security supports, not an imperial invasion, are required to accompany the political consensus so as to bolster humanitarian assistance, economic development, and a more orderly way of life and living. The situation is dire and growing worse by the day. We must not allow ourselves the luxury of Haiti fatigue. Indeed, the guns and bullets in the hands of the Haitian gangs are also in the bosoms of assorted criminals across the Caribbean and Latin America, and sourced mainly from the USA. The US, the Caribbean, and Latin American governments must work together more earnestly to stop this massive flow of guns and bullets. Across the globe, resolutions to wars and perennial conflicts are urgently required. The terrible situations, for example, in Ukraine, Palestine, several countries in Africa and elsewhere, cry out for peaceful settlement between the warring tribes. It is humane and wrong for the Palestinian people to be enduring colonial domination and externally induced suffering for decades. In our America, Your Excellencies, CELAC, led currently by the pro tempore presidency of St. Vincent and Grenadines, is at the forefront of seeking to fortify our political cooperation and enhance integration efforts. CELAC is building vital bridges with several blocs across the world and countries. All this is designed to promote peace, security, prosperity, and sustainable development for all. It is vital that our shared experiences be translated into shared expressions, including institutional expressions, to get the practical work done to enhance life, living, and production for all humanity. And CELAC ought to be allowed to follow the African Union into membership of the G20. Let us be more inclusive in solving intractable problems in practical ways. I thus welcome the proposed initiative, the proposal of the European Union to initiate an institutional summit between the EU, the African Union, CELAC, ASEAN, and with the Secretary General of the United Nations. I await the details. Excellencies, the days of masters and vassals are over. The days of imperialism are drawing nigh, and the would-be hegemons waiting in the wings with their illusions of grandeur, past or imagined, are bound for disillusionment. In any new world order, the metaphoric lambs and the lions must lie down and rise up together in mutual self-interest and respect, and for a better world. This world of 8 billion people deserves better. We in the developing world reject the crumbs. There is a loaf to be shared reasonably, with equity, and we must be at the deciding and the eating tables. Those who think that we speak with our heads in the clouds are profoundly mistaken. We know that in the great cathedral of the sky, there is a sun for steeple. It illuminates our pathways. We see things clearly. Men and women who see things clearly will never give up in the pursuit of peace, goodness, equity, and justice. We do so with urgency, yet with a patience and a calm, knowing that even now the greener leaves explode, sun brightens stone, and all the river burns. As I conclude, a summation from one of my country's poets, Daniel Williams, is apt. We are all time. Only the future is ours to desecrate. The present is the past, and the past our fathers' mischiefs. In order to avoid the desecration of the future, we must be serious about the challenges at hand and work assiduously in solidarity to address them satisfactorily. To be sure, there is no perfection this side of eternity, but we can do better than we have been doing. Time is not on our side. Let us sleep not to dream, but dream to change the world for the better. Thank you.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister and Minister of National Security, Legal Affairs and Information of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the statement made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Fiame Naomi Mata Afa, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the independent state of Samoa. I request protocol to escort her.
All right, and while that is happening, let us then take the opportunity of apologizing, first of all, that we didn't get the start of the address by Ralph Gonzalez, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We promise you we'll pick that up and play it back in its entirety a little later on, as soon as that is available to us. We take the opportunity to talk about some of the presentations that we've had so far, and I'll tell you that very, very outstanding as we've tracked the contributions of Caribbean states at the General Assembly. And I thought that one of the finest speeches delivered was that of the Foreign Minister of the Bahamas, Fred Mitchell, who we shared with you earlier today. It was a different speech from my perspective, really, that just took the opportunity, particularly of showing the place of the Bahamas in the world community, and leading immediately to the matter of Haiti. And as you know, Haiti, of course, is a Bahamas or Bahamian neighbor, and a lot of the refugees, people fleeing Haiti, end up on one of those, or many of the islands of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. They've got 4,000 islands, as he pointed out to us in his address. He talked about this was an opportunity to address the crisis that has existed for several years. Critical moment, because the situation in Haiti is so dire, a word that was used just now by the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines as well, because the story painted by the Haitian Prime Minister yesterday was one in which he clearly laid out how really dire the situation was, with the gangs pillaging, as he said, the communities, not just in Port-au-Prince, but in the rest of the country, outlying and really creating a situation that was really untenable. And as we hear this story again and again about the situation in Haiti, we really move to recognize that something very substantial must be done as far as an intervention is concerned. The leaders have all said so far that they support an intervention of a force that would beef up the Haitian police and give them the ability to suppress the gangs that are marauding the capital and its environs. It's interesting to hear the distinction. Everybody's been very careful not to talk about a military force. I think only in one instance I heard the word military yesterday. The sensitivity really about an intervention, and this is why I think they've been skirting the military imagery, I suppose I might say, for want of a better word at this stage. The prospect of a military intervention really brings back a lot of memories of previous interventions, some under the United Nations, others, as you remember, directly from the United States, and really an occupying force that really did not settle things. Over the decades, every attempt has been made now to bring Haiti to a situation where, for instance, free and fair elections could be held, and that the presidents and so on and the parliamentary system would function consistently. We've seen that has been really, really fraught with problems from time to time. One of the interesting aspects of all the presentations as well in that regard is the call for the stakeholders in Haiti to arrive at a decision or decisions that would move the process forward. You heard Prime Minister Gonzalez talking about compromise. It's a word that's being used by several of the leaders, urging the stakeholders in Haiti themselves, if they want to have a Haitian solution to a Haitian problem, they have to be the heart of the resolution, but with the support of outside interest. And those outside interests right now, led specifically by Kenya, who have offered to provide the manpower, to provide the security strength that is required. That offer from Kenya, has also been supported by Rwanda. So those are two countries that have committed so far. Caribbean states, specifically Jamaica and the Bahamas, have said, yes, we provide police resources as well. And the really hovering situation is that of the UN Security Council, the 5 members of the Security Council, who are being appealed to by everybody to make a decision in supporting a resolution that would put this move, the work of Kenya, Rwanda, and so on, under the flag of the United Nations peacekeeping program. That is a resolution, as you heard a number of speakers say, has been meandering through the Security Council. There's a certain hesitation, obviously, because of the past history of interventions in Haiti. And it will be interesting to see exactly when and how soon this particular resolution will be brought to a vote and passed or rejected. That really is the challenge at the moment. We're standing by for a presentation by the Prime Minister of St. Kitts and Nevis, Terence Drew. He's had an opportunity to hear and see presentations by previous Caricom leaders. I don't think that really informs too much of what he's going to say, because he's got his own positions on a number of these matters. Those matters revolve around consistently calls, for instance, for the lifting of the embargo against Cuba, which has now been 60 years and counting. And the point made by the Foreign Minister of the Belize, Fred Mitchell, earlier was one in which he says, look, if you can do business with Vietnam, then you can certainly do business with Cuba. And I'm not sure if you're following the presentations that have been made by the leaders, but also following the news of the world, so to speak, and the activities of the American President Joe Biden, you will know that the United States, after having a war with Vietnam, it was then North Vietnam, has had a major meeting, what the word we might have used, a rapprochement with Vietnam itself. And they have put all of the decades of anger and whatever else behind them, and now have forged a new relationship with Vietnam. Of course, they're both on either side anxious to resolve some of the issues as a holdover from that war. They certainly would like to see the remains of soldiers on both sides returned, so they'd have a decent burial and have closure for their families. And the real reality is that he was pointing to was the fact that the Americans can make peace with Vietnam, and why not make peace as well with Cuba. All right, so that's one. The other, of course, is Venezuela. As you know, the attempts by Venezuela to get back into heavy oil production, to resolve some of the issues that they've had over time, that has been sticking really with the imposition of sanctions, particularly by the United States. And there's the call then for the lifting of those sanctions. One of the points made by a speaker yesterday was the fact that and I think that was Prime Minister Mia Mottley, making the point that the sanctions against Venezuela were very wrong, and that Caribbean states are at a disadvantage in that we don't have access to the facility, the Petrocarib facility, because of those sanctions, etc. The Petrocarib facility provided oil resources from Venezuela at 35% discount. And in fact, the payment scheme allowed for Caribbean states to take the difference and to apply it to social services and so on. So Venezuela is one of those critical issues that the leaders would like to have resolved. We're going to take a break and come back in a little while and pick up on the presentation from the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I'm Julian Rogers on Caribbean Bridges.